It is September 14th, 2020, and today we're going to have a look at China's historic 1931 floods. The 1931 China floods were a series of floods that occurred from June to August of 1931 in the Republic of China, hitting major cities of Wuhan, Nanjing, and beyond, eventually culminating into a dike breach along Lake Jiaoyu on August 25th. Estimates of the number of people affected vary widely. A field survey by University of Nanking-led John Lossing Buck immediately after the flood found that 150,000 people had perished, and that this number represented less than a quarter of everyone affected during the first 100 days of the flood. The official report found that the effects from the flood caused over 2 million people to perish. The floods were followed by a cholera epidemic in the subsequent year, starting in May of 1932. From 1928 to 1930, China was afflicted by a long drought. The subsequent winter of 1930 was particularly harsh, creating large deposits of snow and ice in mountainous areas. Early in 1931, melting snow and ice flowed downstream and arrived in the Middle Yangtze during a period of heavy spring rain. Ordinarily, the region experienced 3 periods of high water during the spring, summer, and autumn. Early 1931, there was a single continuous deluge. By June, those living in low areas had already been forced to abandon their homes. The summer was also characterized by extreme cyclonic activity. In July of that year alone, 9 cyclones hit the region, which was significantly above the average of 2 per year. 4 weather stations along the Yangtze River reported rain totaling over 600 millimeters, that's 24 inches for the month. The water flowing through the Yangtze reached its highest level since record-keeping began in the mid-19th century. That autumn, further heavy rain added to the problem, and some rivers did not return to their normal courses until November. The floods inundated approximately 180,000 square kilometers, an area equivalent to the size of England and half of Scotland, or the states of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut combined. The most heavily affected provinces were Anhui, Hubei, Hunan, Jiangsu, Jiangxi, Henan, and Shandong. Beyond the core flood zone, areas as far south as Guangdong and as far west as Sichuan were also inundated. Historians have since suggested that the true number of people affected may have been as many as 53 million. The flood destroyed huge amounts of housing and farmland. Throughout the whole Yangtze Valley, around 15% of wheat and rice crops were destroyed, with the proportion being much higher in the flood-affected areas. The disaster also caused an economic shock, with the price of vital commodities rising rapidly. The combined ecological and economic impacts of the disaster caused many areas to descend into famine. With no food, people were reduced to eating tree bark, weeds, and earth. The most lethal effect of the flood was the diseases that swept through the refugee population due to displacement, overcrowding, and the breakdown of sanitation. As well as inundating rural areas, the flood caused widespread destruction to a number of cities. Refugees had been arriving in the city of Wuhan since the late spring, when the city itself was inundated in the early summer after a catastrophic dike failure just before 6 a.m. on July 27th. The flood displaced around 782,000 people and covered an area of 32 square miles. The city was under many feet of water for close to 3 months. Large numbers of people gathered on flood islands throughout the city, with 30,000 sheltering on a railway embankment in central Hankou. There was no warning, only a sudden wall of water. Most of Wuhan's buildings in those days were only 1 story high, and for many people there was no escape. I was just coming off duty at the company's main office, a fairly new 3-story building at the center of town, when I heard the terrible noise and saw the wall of water coming. I raced to the top story of the building. I was in one of the tallest and strongest buildings left standing. At that time, no one knew whether the water would subside or rise even higher, said Jin Shilong, senior engineer at the Hubei Flood Prevention Agency. The city of Nanjing, then the capital of the Republic of China, was also severely affected. One of the worst single events during the flood occurred on August 25th of 1931, when the water rushing through the Grand Canal washed away dikes near Jiaoyu Lake. As the scale of the event became apparent, the government established the National Flood Relief Commission. Eventually, the Chinese government managed to secure a large loan of wheat and flour from the United States. However, due to a lack of funding, the chaotic situation with Japan, and the subsequent civil issues, the various commissions were only able to construct small dams along the Yangtze River. By 1953, things were calming down in China, and leader Mao traveled to the Yangtze River to promote the Three Gorges Dam flood control project. The Three Gorges Dam project should exceed other major projects in Chinese history, such as the Great Wall and the Grand Canal, he stated. Thank you for watching this video. If you're finding it informative, please consider giving the channel a subscribe. And our last piece of information is a series of interesting tweets. And I think that's a good place to wrap up today's video. I hope that you found it informative, and check back soon for more content.